It's going to take just a second here. Okay, so my mind leapt from Pfizer to Biden to China. And I was wondering if do you know what is the connection between Biden and China? I know the connection between Biden and Ukraine, and that's pretty stinking awful. But the reason I bring it up is because after watching this video, I was telling Beth about it, and she said, "Who left the back door open for the CCP to infiltrate America?" Yeah, and my thought was that it was the Obama administration. But of course, who was the Veep? Who was the Veep under Obama, right?
Yeah, but it goes back further than that.
Okay.
But, I mean, the Chinese Communist Party spy network has been so pervasive, and like talent scouts, they have cultivated quite a lot of politicians in America at an early point in the stage, like that Swalwell, worthless bucket Swalwell.
Yes.
They cultivating when he was running for city council.
Okay.
I mean, they already had that spy girl.
Yep.
Knocking boots with him, so to speak.
Yes,
when
exactly.
He was a city councilman. They'd already tapped him as someone who was going to be in other positions. But that tells me not just that they can spot individual talent, but that they have to have a lot of this activity.
Right. And yeah.
Well, I was going to say, in Biden's case, his son Hunter Biden has been doing considerable business with the Chinese government.
That's what I remember that too. and you know, I know that the land in America started getting bought up under, I think, Bush, because it was in the early 2000s. I think that they began buying up land on a huge basis. Maybe under Clinton. Might have been under Clinton.
Yes, I remember it happening under Clinton. Will.
Yeah, I think it was under Clinton. But they began.
And there was the cash bundlers in California under Clinton.
Yeah. So it's been happening since the 90s at the latest, really. But of course, it was under Bush that we're all like, "Yay, China's becoming a capitalist nation, and they're on the rise, and isn't that wonderful?" Blah blah blah. Which of course is a canard, because we now know that that's a canard. But it was really stunning to hear this woman say point blank, this was a weapon, and that the CCP has numerous weapons in their arsenal that they've been employing, and Americans don't know that it's happening. She said everything from the undermining of the family to the destruction of government has been part of their arsenal. And when Dr. Drew said, he had mentioned that he didn't think that the virus release was that effective a weapon because it didn't kill everybody, and that seems like a really bad weapon, basically. And her point was that American definitions of success are different from Chinese definitions of success. So for China, success means wearing down your enemy until they can't fight anymore, destroying everything that would allow them to have the gumption, the what do you call it, the metal, to be able to persist in a fight. So it's not just the virus.
As in a virus that is not virulent enough that you could say for sure this was a bioweapon?
No, I think rather it's that the virus is one of many different things, and the success of the virus, they didn't care whether it killed everybody or not. What they cared about was whether or not it decimated enough of the population, made us lose our collective minds, and made us fearful for future attacks. So whether it decimated us or not was not, that was a nice bonus, but that wasn't the main goal.
Well, I'm not going to say that I think that's crazy, because I actually think it's plausible. I don't think it worked out quite the way they intended either, in that their own population is come closer towards revolution.
They have.
Than I think they could ever have expected.
They have, and if with any luck they'll have a civil war on their hands, and then we can breathe a somewhat sigh of relief. But what is the? Remember with Sun Tzu, what is his first edict of war? Right, all war is deception. So I mean, if that's the case, how much are we getting about China and about what they're doing that is accurate, is for real? That makes it a little tricky.
Yeah, and neither you nor I are in a position to really be able to speak to that.
No, we aren't. No, we aren't. But we are in a position to say that the CCP is such a government that it's not implausible that we've been at war since the 1990s. Our hot war, is not always the only form of war.
Culturally, China would not change even with a different government. It hasn't changed for 2,000.
I agree with you.
Years.
Explain that. Explain what you just said, because I agree with you.
As a people, they have been willing to suffer terrible hardship in pursuit of what they do as a common project. And that's actually in many ways very admirable. At certain points in China's history, that's led to wonderful things that they've done. The Tang period, the early Ming period, both are really good times for what China was contributing to the world. But that exact same attitude is the one that led to the violence of the Yang period. Under the Mongol conquerors, under Kublai Khan.
Right.
The violence of 2,300 years ago, the Qin period, when they first formed as what we now recognize as modern China.
Yeah.
He killed so many people, putting China together, and the people accepted. I mean, the histories talk about hundreds of thousands of people being killed in those wars, whole cities just being wiped out.
So you would suggest that the cultural, as a culture, the majority of people in China, think differently about their relationship to their rulers and relationship to one another than, say, an American or a Westerner.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, I'm not pushing back too hard on that necessarily. I'm just wanting clarity's sake. Do you think that the Communist Party is at all different from what came before? And second question on that is, do you think it would have been different had Chiang Kai-shek won against Mao Zedong back during the Civil War in China?
As for the first part, the Chinese Communist Party is much more brutal than some of the earlier periods of Chinese government. They resemble the Qin period, or even before that, the War of the Kingdoms, who were willing to do horrible things just to take power.
Okay.
And to control people, not just in terms of like your political life, who you're going to support the king, but to control what you think.
Oh,
that has happened in China's past.
Yeah.
But there are other periods when China's had a much better government. The Tang period, for example, when the magistrate system that you could get into from any class, as long as you could pass the government exam, you were guaranteed a government position after that point, which allowed a measure of equality between the poorest and the richest.
And my understanding is that China has been a bureaucracy-run country for most of its history. So that, for instance, the emperor himself is not the like when a new emperor takes over, he basically just assumes the old bureaucracy into his government. That's right?
Accurate, yes.
Okay. So when Mao Zedong, excuse me for a minute, Andrew, could you please maybe go upstairs, maybe, and read? Thank you. Thank you. Let's keep it good for a minute. Hell of high water.
The joy of raising kids.
Yeah,
Every parent has to say, go to bed.
Yeah, multiple times.
Yes.
Well, I'm trying to regain my thought. Oh, so when the communists finally took over, when they defeated Chiang Kai-shek and took over, it seems to me that the transfer of power was just a transfer of an attitude, but with the same bureaucracy in it, maybe, because there do seem to be things that were radically different in the whole communist thing from before. And this AI is like moving backwards behind us. And one of the things that seems really radically different is that the communist idea is a Western idea that was grafted into the bureaucracy system. So the efficiency of Chinese bureaucracy suddenly came under the auspice of a brutal, anti-human philosophy of government. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I would say that the Chinese Communist Party has been much more anti-human than any other
Oh,
government in China, even the most brutal and oppressive.
yeah, no, it seems to me that's definitely the case. And so it's almost like it's a toxic brew of two different, like, if you had a really inefficient bureaucracy with, like, say Russia, an inefficient bureaucracy with a communist ideal, you might end up with some disasters for sure. But they would be disasters because, like, oops, we didn't have enough guys or blankets or supplies or whatever the hell it was, or bullets. Um, with China, it's almost like we have this very efficient bureaucracy, and now we got this lethal way of looking at the world. And yeah, I mean, like, take one instance, okay? In prior governments in China, they were pretty self-sufficient, and they survived, it seems to me, with their neighbors primarily on trade. Okay, and
You refer to the people or the government in China?
I mean like the country from north to south. The government itself, I guess the country itself, it didn't seem to go
Okay.
around conquering its neighbors. Like, they never made an incursion into Russia. They never seemed to have, except for the Mongols who tried to conquer Japan. They never tried to go and conquer India necessarily. It's under the communist government that they have seemed to be trying to conquer others and see others as enemies. And that's primarily because of the communist idea of the dialectic, it seems to me, that you always have to have an enemy to fight to justify your own existence.
That is definitely a communist viewpoint because although China has always been very nationalistic, um, they have not always said everything outside is the enemy. Um, China historically brought in quite a lot of multiculturalism.
Yes.
Um, there was a flourishing Jewish community in China
Oh,
1,000
wow.
years ago. In
Didn't know
addition
that.
to, there was. In addition to the Buddhists and the Muslims, and a Christian community that was 1,000 years ago.
Wow.
Um, and they didn't see each other as the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
They lived in different quarters, but they didn't have these pogroms to kill the entire Jewish section.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't happen. Whereas the communists do say, not in China's border, you are the enemy.
Well, that's what I'm thinking about, is that the communists always seem, it's like George Orwell said, right? Oceania needs Airstrip 1 and Airstrip 1 needs Oceania. Because you have this perpetual state of war. I mean, of course, he was framing. It's strange. The older I get, the more lacunae I have in my understanding. I didn't really understand the dialectic, the Hegelian dialectic, until this year. I mean, I'd heard about it and blah blah blah, but I really didn't understand it until this year. And for anybody who does watch this video later on, if you do, the Hegelian dialectic is what really gave birth to the Marxian ideas in the Communist Manifesto. Marx took Hegel's ideas and he ran with them. And one of the big things with Hegel is that he says all history is a dialectic between thesis and antithesis. That you have to have these two opposing ideas, and two opposing ideas constantly throughout history clash with one another, fight violently, and then mingle and come to a new thing called a thesis or synthesis. And you can only get to that synthesis through the violent conflict between thesis and antithesis. So when Marx goes and writes the Communist Manifesto, it built into the whole system is the idea of warfare. You have to have violent warfare constantly in order to move towards a synthesis. So that's what I'm getting at with China, is that I don't see China, especially America, I don't see China seeing America as the enemy up until Mao Zedong.
Well, we weren't the enemy. I mean, we had very good relationships with China until now.
Yeah. Now
certainly better than Britain did.
Oh, really? Yeah, right. Yeah, the Boxer Rebellion and all that. Well, Britain tried to take their tea, or tried to use their land for tea, from what I understand.
Britain tried to make sure that the drug trade was flourishing all throughout China.
The opium, right?
Yeah.
The opium.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It was. By the way, thank you for explaining that to me about the dialectic, because I'm not going to pretend like I've had great knowledge about it. I haven't thought about Hegel's dialectic for 35 years.
Well, it doesn't me neither, but it seems like the time is necessitating certain things be revisited. I watched a really good, I don't know if I sent it to you, a really good synopsis of the Russian Revolution that was done by Flapper, the YouTube site Flapper. And he's just kind of a satirical, slightly perverted conservative who does these. He did a French Revolution documentary, and he is doing a China history documentary. And they're fun and they're humorous, but they get the point across. So I really enjoyed his discussion of the Hegelian dialectic in his video. And I went out and I got one of the books that was suggested by him, which is called The Naked Communist. It's a really good read. I highly recommend it. I forget the author, but highly recommend it, Naked Communist, because this guy, writing in 1956 for high school students, is basically laying out not just the ideas of communism and why they're wrong, but he's laying out the history of Russia in terms of communism and any other countries at the time that were infected with communism as well. Now, this is before the Vietnam War, it's before the Cuban Revolution, so we didn't have anything like the killing fields or anything like that yet, but we did have the Chinese Revolution by that point, and he tackles that as well.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend it. It's very good for discussing this dialectic business.
The Naked Communist, huh?
The Naked Communist. He did another one called The Naked Socialist, which I look forward to reading as well, because I think there he tackled how has communism infiltrated into America. And
yeah.
He's again it, which I like.
Well, good, because it certainly has a very bad track record.
It seems to have done some bad things every now and then.
Russia was actually not a bad place during the Tsarist period.
Ben, this will blow your mind. Russia was not a bad place after the Tsar was deposed either. I did not know this. Russia set up a democratic republic in 1917. The 1917 revolution, according to this guy, and I'll have to double check this, the 1917 revolution deposed the Tsar, set up a democratic republic, had a provisional government for about a year. Then the Bolsheviks came in and started civil war. Civil war lasted 4 years. By the end of it, they were just devastated by it, and the Bolsheviks violently took over the government, and that was it, right?
Let me add to you an interesting piece of history for all those who are watching this, of a military conflict that the United States lost at that period. We don't talk about it. When we invaded Siberia in favor of the democratic government of Russia and against the Reds.
That's a bit. I knew bits of that. Tell me more.
We sent an army into Siberia to counter the communists, the Bolshevik army was there. But it was right after the First World War, and Wilson was incapacitated at the time. So with the pacifist Senate and House, there was no ability politically to sustain it. So we actually suffered some defeats in Siberia and pulled our army out.
Son of a gun. How about that? And then here we are shoving goods and supplies to the commies later on in 39 or whatever it was, right? Or 40 or 41, whatever it was. During the Second World War. I mean, good for us. Yay.
Yeah, that was an alliance that had to be made, but I don't know. I think Roosevelt was stupid enough to think that the communists could be friends.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Churchill was never under any illusions about what that was. It was
Yeah.
necessary, but awful.
Yeah, he and Patton both, right?
Yeah.
High-voiced Patton saw it as a detriment to Western civilization. Most people don't know that about Patton. They think of George C. Scott, right? I don't want to hear any of you holding anything. Why don't you push through the Germans like poop through a goose? That's actually not how Patton talked, apparently. Patton was a Southerner, and he talked in a very high Southern voice.
Yeah, that's interesting. I did not know that.
Apparently. He was also quite the martinet. He wore white gloves on the field of battle, and he had pearl-handled pistols that he strapped onto his side.
Well, he also had very good military judgment.
He apparently did, yes. He was terrifying to the crowds.
So that was back in the day when you were put into positions of authority in America, not because of your credentials, but because of your ability.
Yeah, because of your success. Speaking of which...
Unlike these days.
Yeah, unlike these days. Good Lord. Okay, just a quick rant. The head of transportation, right? What a cock-up, you know? And then you got this fool of a took who's stealing bags everywhere when he's not wearing high heels and lipstick. And then who the hell thought it was a good idea to try and send out people to get rid of gas ranges, right? That's going to solve everything.
Yeah. I'm actually glad that news about that broke before they tried to do anything, because, Jesus Christ, what a moronic idea.
That's what we need right now. A gas range police.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's going to solve all of our problems.
God damn.
At least you won't have to worry about fuel costs.
Well, at least you won't have to worry about the food you can't cook on those gas ranges.
That's a good point. I won't have to worry about, was it carcinogens from overcooked meat?
That's right. Well, somebody was saying that if they took the gas range, it'd be no problem because it just burned wood. And I was thinking, yeah, we'll all start burning wood and coal, and that'll put us back to the early part of the 19th century when London was black with soot on a regular basis. Yeah, that'll be a real step forward.
Yeah. Well, when you and I were young, we still had acid rain from all the pollution that was going up in the air. Those are the days before gas. You remember?
The Black Forest. The Black Forest was
we were
denuded.
In school, and they kept We had all these things in our classes where they were showing us the pictures of what the acid rain was doing. And that's what it was like back before people burned natural gas.
I'm telling you, buddy, follow the science.
I'm ready to go out and cut some wood down. I'm ready to cut some wood. Hang on. Have we got a wooden light pole here? Hang on. Cut some wood down.
Here come the stupid police.
Dang it, that's a metal pole.
Authority figures. Where's our base? We need to get to
it's right over here.
Go to the high base. Let's go to the mountaintop. Nice. And you call yourself a man of the church.
Hey, do you like my nifty new robes?
Yeah, I do. Those are pretty cool. Those are pretty whack. Pretty whack, baby. No, wait. I got something else to talk about here, but we got to go to... Where's the one? Oh, it's 3 count, isn't it? And I can't fly in this game. Do you have a truck?
Where are you going?
Get in a truck. Get in.
All right, I'm coming. Hey, you got your wench in the truck, not me.
I'm sorry.
Hang on, I'll surf on top.
Can you surf on top? Yeah, surf on top.
No, I can't jump up on your truck.
Go on the back. Go on the chassis. There you go. Okay, ready?
I'm surfing on the back.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so one other thing that I wanted to talk about that I was thinking about today, and this just came up, I like to watch videos. I like to watch YouTube videos on a regular basis. And so I was watching this YouTube video. It was an interview that Jordan Peterson was doing with a woman that had tried to be a man at a very young age and regretted it tremendously and was trying to transition back.
That's a sad thing when they try that.
Oh, it's horrible. I mean, it's horrible. It's butchery, it's the destruction of youth. But in the midst of the conversation, Peterson was pointing out that, this is not where I want to go. Peterson was pointing out that women regularly dress and act in the way that they think men will think is attractive. Where'd you go?
Why it fell off the back.
in the way that they think men will see as attractive. Okay, now that we all know that that's pretty obvious, right? But what
Yes.
isn't so obvious is that that would account for a great many cultural trends where women dressed a certain way based on what men find attractive. And it leads me to ask the question about 1920s flappers. Okay, so this isn't completely devoid from our previous discussion. Okay, this is where we want to go. I'm sorry, get on it. This isn't completely devoid from our previous discussion because I'm wondering with the flappers, we've always been told that the flappers who cut their hair short and greased it down and then wore really tight clothing underneath to reduce their enthusiasm, and then basically dressed like bullets or like machines or something like that. We've always been told that the dress was because they were becoming part of the machine age or the bullet age. But this is a weird thing here. What if they were doing it because men coming back from the war, from the front, where there aren't a lot of women, found it attractive? What if they found it attractive because it made them look like boys? Are you following me here?
I think I am.
In other words,
I'm thinking whether or not that was true in a large enough fraction of the male population, but maybe you don't have to have it in a large fraction. Maybe you'll need to have it in the top levels.
Here's what I was thinking on this is that, you had before that the Belle Epoque and the Gibson girl and the curvaceous woman with a very tight corset. And that was
Gibson girls were very attractive.
They're very attractive, and that was considered attractive in the 19th century. And then suddenly there's this. It's not like a slow transition, and it's not like women go out and burn their corsets in defiance of the patriarchy or some shit like that. It's this very distinct and really radically different way of dressing and acting, which. It just occurred to me, there was a lot of cross-dressing during the 1920s, too. We don't talk about that a lot. A lot of cross-dressing and a lot of homosexuality that occurred in Oxford and other places,
Yes.
And I'm wondering if maybe that whole flapper movement was an attempt to attract men who had gotten used to boys to women. Odd thought, I know. But notice how in the 1940s, by the 1930s, homosexuality had become really an anathema in America, whereas before it was so just like tolerated, but it became anathema. And so women began dressing in the late 1930s and 1940s in a not curvaceous, but a pointy, feminine way. They're much more
much less androgynous.
Yes, much less androgynous. The flapper style.
And I think androgynous is the important thing.
Yeah.
Remember that we had that phase 20 years ago when androgyny was also the fashion statement.
I remember that Annie Lennox and people like that.
Yeah.
I remember that. And what would account for that? I wonder. Huh. I don't know. It's just a thought. It's strange, odd thoughts that I have on a regular basis when I'm not beating these citizens up. Like this guy.
He's a nice guy. Stop punching that guy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, what happened to the good guy?
I'm sorry.
All right, hang on. I'll dispose of the body for you. There you go. No mess.
No man, no problem. As a certain wise person said, right? No man, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
There's another body over there.
One of the connections that this leads to, is back to China. And this is kind of where my thought was taking me. China right now, I think it's like a 10-to-1 ratio of males to females.
Not quite that bad, but it's very bad.
It's bad.
It's more like it's 1.8 to 1, almost 2 to 1.
2 to 1, okay.
So which is terrible because that means you drop the population half every single generation.
50%. But it's not 10 to 1, which would be completely disastrous within a few years.
Yeah.
But part of that is, if, for instance, they are of that mode, so to speak, no doubt they are experiencing also a sort of shall we say, Spartan ethics
I
between
see
men.
what you're saying. Right.
And consequently, consequently, I'm wondering if they're going to be seeing a certain societal collapse, but I'm wondering if maybe that societal collapse is also an attempt to gain. Sounds so weird. An attempt to gain females. The conquering is an attempt to gain females.
Reverting back to the Stone Age mindset.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we'll have to watch fashion in China, because if you're right, you're going to see
Yep.
This androgynous. Oh, actually, now that I'm thinking of it, think about K-pop bands from Korea. I don't
Yep.
know how popular they are in China, but they're essentially androgynous.
They totally are. Yeah, they totally are. And what solved this sounds sick, but what solved our problem in the 1920s? In the 1920s, there were fewer men and more women. So women were trying to make themselves more attractive to men. What happened in the 1920s and 30s? Well, the population of men rose again. Eligible men rose again, right? And so by the 1930s, homosexuality was on the outs, so to speak. But women were able to attract men by being women and not boys.
So, in other words, reverting back to the more natural state.
Yes, right, exactly. Yeah, right.
Actually reproduces the species.
Yeah. It's the same, like a lot of people don't want to talk about this, that the economic situation in America wasn't fixed by World War II. It actually continued. No. It continued way up until almost the end of World War II. And the reason it actually came back online, so to speak, is that when people came back from the war, there were plenty of jobs and not as many people. I mean, enough people have been killed that there were job openings, space available. So
yeah, about 1.5 million job openings.
Yeah. Sad to say, and so that stimulated the economy like nothing else. So, the demographics and the demographics of sexuality especially is very rarely accounted for when we're talking about geopolitics.
People don't talk about it, but all of our economic interactions in this world follow the patterns of biology.
Mm-hmm.
People don't like to think that.
Mm-hmm.
If you try and get away from what the biological impulse is, and I'm talking about more than just sex, but sex is part of it. If you try and get away from that, there is this strong push that always occurs to push you back towards the biological normal.
Yep. Yes. Which, again, leads to another issue, which is that, you mentioned the androgyny of the 90s. That pushed into the androgyny of the 2000s and, of course, the chaos of the teens that we're now reaping the whirlwind on. This mutilation of bodies and gender dysphoria and gender fluidity, blah, 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 blah.
I hate to say it, but the most likely way that is going to come back to normal is that they will kill themselves.
I think that's terribly sad. I think it's terrible. It's awful, but I think you're right. Either suicide or else just dying out because of infertility. I mean, one of the things this young girl was saying is really sad is she's experiencing at 22, I think she's 21 or 22, she's experiencing all of the lack of sex drive that a 60-year-old woman experiences.
That is really sad.
It's horrible. It's like menopause at age 20. And
it's like you've lost your entire young life.
I know. Yeah, it's just gone. And there's going to be a lot of people that are experiencing that are going through this chaos right now. They don't see things keep leading about again. They don't see a future at all. And that's, of course, what's contributing a great deal to the suicidal level. But it's also contributing to a population that is in real trouble. And, of course, when you have real trouble domestically, especially with people that can't reproduce or can't find a mate or whatever, what do? You turn their anger, their aggression, and depression outward towards an enemy. So if we go back to the China problem.
Yeah, which often leads to war, conquest, Viking.
Something to occupy the mind so you don't have to think about the fact that you've wrecked your domestic situation.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm sorry to have a depressing situation.
Well, I will say this though, the comforting thing though, think of it from the long period of time and how quickly all these things are forgotten
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
the old generations have died out.
Yep.
It does come back to normal again and again and again.
It does.
Um,
Yeah, it comes back to the baseline. I agree.
yeah.
It's not going to last forever. It's going to be something, but it may not see it in our lifetime. We may see even worsening in our lifetime. I don't know. Um, but we may see a bettering too. Who knows? We never thought things like the Berlin Wall coming down would occur during our lifetime.
No, back during the 1980s, well, that didn't seem very probable.
Didn't seem probable at all.
I mean, again, when you and I were young, the Soviet Union looked like it was ascended.
Yep. It was like an ice dam just suddenly bursting, and that was it. It flooded the world. Huh.
And I will say that it might have turned out differently in Russia than it has done. The U.S. government bears a certain degree of blame for sponsoring the worst actors in Russia.
Yes, but an interesting point was made by Flapper in his documentary. He judges that Putin is basically just a czar with a different name.
No, I think he's totally right.
I think he's right too. I think Putin is basically he's operating almost exactly like Nicholas did, just without the beard.
Well, they fell out of fashion.
Yeah, right, exactly. But he's doing all the things that Nicholas, Nicholas, for all the people that want to make him into a saint, Nicholas was an idiot, and he was a cruel idiot, too.
I had no idea anyone wanted to make Tsar Nicholas into a saint.
Oh, yeah, hell yeah. There's a huge movement in Russia. Yep, no, yeah. Huge movement in Russia to make him a saint. Yep. In the Russian Orthodox Church. It's quite surprising, really. And I don't know.
Part of the nationalist movement?
Yeah, I think it has to do with that. I think it's a lot of the nationalist movement and looking back on the past with rose-colored glasses, because Nicholas was the last guy before the horror of Stalin, and so probably that's what it is all about. I don't know. People are weird.
Yeah, they are.
And the weirdness of humans leads me to one other subject that I was interested in, and just bring it up with you. I follow Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock, and they're interesting blokes. And of course, I see everything from an atheist viewpoint, where they're like, if it's going to go wrong, if it could go wrong, it will go wrong. But nevertheless, they bring out some interesting points. And one of the things that Carlson is saying is that the North American continent was flooded, was scoured by these massive floods that wiped out the populations. And I don't know if it's true or not. Who knows? I mean, you said show me the evidence. Well, one of the evidence things that I'm really interested in is why is there no extensive infrastructure in North America when Europeans come here? I mean, maybe there is, and I just don't know about it. But it doesn't seem like there's any. There was an Incan series of roads, I know, in the Incan Empire. I know that the Aztecs had a series of runners that they used. There was trade, of course, between the various Indian tribes and the nation of the Iroquois.
The trade networks were very extensive.
I have been reading about the civil war that occurred in the northeastern America that led to the Iroquois nation, because I didn't know much about that at all. They butchered one another.
We should have a talk about that one of these nights. Just talk about American Indian history.
Yeah, what I'm learning of it, because my knowledge of it is paltry, I'm afraid.
Well, it's a really fascinating topic. I also have been reading a lot about it too, because I've learned. They keep pushing the idea that American Indians are our saints, which is not true. But it was so much more complicated than the history that we're always told.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is much more complicated. And what I can't figure out, Ben, I don't know whether this is because they didn't have the wheel or because they didn't have cart animals, but there are almost no roads in the pre-Columbian United States, and there are certainly no paved roads that I can tell in North America. Am I wrong in that? Do you know?
No, you're quite right. Also, I personally think that you are correct. It has to do with the fact that there were no carts. You don't need a paved road.
Well, that leads
traffic.
But that leads to another question. Romans had the wheel, they had the oxen, but they didn't build the roads for that. They built the roads in order to transport troops, walking troops. So was it a lack of imagination in North American tribes that they didn't want to go and conquer their enemies, so they didn't build roads? Or was it simply they didn't have pack animals, so they didn't need to build roads for those pack animals? And then that begs the question, well, why the hell didn't they have pack animals? And why didn't they have a wheel, even?
Well, I'm going to challenge you on that thing about the roads.
Uh-huh.
I agree that the Romans built the roads in order to move the troops, but the concept of creating a road in the first place predates the Romans by quite a bit.
Uh-huh.
Persian Empire built roads for trade,
True.
to deliver the mail,
Yep.
and to transport goods on carts.
Yep.
The Romans inherited the idea that the world should be bound together by roads.
Uh-huh. Okay.
But the first thought of it did come from people that were transporting carts.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Now, if American Indians never had carts, they never had the impetus to do that.
Well,
When messages were to be sent, they had runners.
yeah, and that's one of these videos I was watching on the American Indians about this issue. They were saying, or maybe it was in a Quora string, I don't remember, but they were saying basically the Indians never developed the wheel for transportation because they never had any pack animals, and because things seemed to work pretty well with dogs and with human labor. Which, okay, I buy that. I buy that. It's certainly more plausible to me even than the religious possibility, the religious edict that might have prevented the use of the wheel. Um, but it does still baffle me a bit why they wouldn't have. What they obviously had was a lathe. You know, they obviously turned pottery on lathes. It baffles me why they wouldn't use that same structure horizontally to make movement of objects easier, even if it was human or dog labor. You know, they didn't have horses, they didn't have cattle. I got it, but you got humans, rickshaw boys. You know.
So I see what you're saying. It is quite a mystery, actually.
Yeah.
Especially the Central American people, or the people in Cahokia, up in Illinois, that they did not use wheels. Cahokia had roads.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Cahokia had roads.
Not well built up roads, but
no, but they did have roads. So
yeah.
they had the concept of it.
They did.
I really don't know.
I don't either. It's quite a mystery to me. And if one looks at, say, the Aztec Empire, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Aztec Empire was solidified or finalized in the early 1400s. And it was only 92 years later, 100 years later, that Columbus came in contact with the Native Americans. So it could also be just a late start. But of course, then got the question, a late start, but there were people before that. Olmecs and Toltecs.
There's extensive, the civilization through Central America is extensive and over 2,000 years old.
Yeah.
The Mayans were building those fantastic structures as early as 200 AD.
Yeah.
What were they, 2000 BC?
Olmecs in 2000, which, of course, they're finding more of them in the jungles. The jungles have conquered those buildings, those structures.
Yeah, jungles do that.
Yeah. Well, it's just fascinating to me, and of course, that's all the central part of the area. The northern part of the area, up where we live, and like, didn't see hide nor hair of that stuff. Cahokia even was certainly a complex, but first off, they didn't.
But Cahokia is also late too.
Yeah, it's later. Yeah. And so what what happened? I guess is the question. Why did it not happen to the extent that it did in Europe or in other parts of the world? One suggestion.
I have no suggestion.
I don't either. One suggestion that did come up, and this is kind of intriguing. I was looking at this with there's either Randall Carlson or somebody else I was looking at, but they were saying that weather patterns on large continents are far more severe than they are in coastal areas. So, for instance, the weather patterns in England are not nearly anywhere near what they are in America. But in Russia, they're very, very severe. They go from very warm summers to very, very cold winters. And so the large continents have these weather patterns because they don't have the warmth of the ocean to be able to warm the air and thus modify the fluctuations. If that's the case, it is possible that the severity of climate in the northern part of this hemisphere, this continent, was too much for primitive people to be able to carve out an existence of any extent. I mean, we don't see any signs of civilization hardly in the interior of Russia, which has a similar climate.
I am going to challenge you on that one, Will.
Go for it.
I'm not going to say that there was like this Hyperborean civilization in Russia, but there actually was a kingdom in Russia just before the period of the Mongols up in Siberia, and it was fairly strong advanced civilization that was there.
Interesting.
Now there's almost no trace of them anymore, but it's like the Lost Kingdom up in England near Northumberland. There was a separate kingdom there in contemporary with Alfred the Great, which we don't even think about anymore. It's left no mark on modern history.
What?
But there were people doing that in Russia.
Yeah. And was that due to a climate that was warmer at all?
Possibly, probably. Now that I'm thinking of it.
Okay.
Because it didn't freeze over until the 1300s. The world was much nicer back before global cooling kicked in.
And honestly, I had heard about it before, but it never registered with me. The boot of the Mongol Empire was over the neck of Russia from what, 1200 onwards, or what was the period?
Pretty much.
Was
yeah.
It? Okay.
Yeah, about the 1200s.
Wow.
Dante Alighieri.
Oh, wow. So late 1200s.
Yeah.
Dang.
Remember, Dante and Marco Polo are contemporaries.
Yeah, so they swept into Russia and subdued the people and kept them there for what, 200 or 300 years or something like that.
Yes, until the Duchy of Muscovy has reestablished themselves. My friend Dmitri, his village that he came from right near Moscow is the exact border where the Mongols came.
Oh, wow.
And he said there's still a church there that you can only see the tower of it. Everything else is buried under the ground because that's what the Mongols did to it.
What?
Yeah.
They buried the church underground?
No, they buried the whole city.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Those are not nice guys, those Mongols. You know?
They were very good political administrators when they weren't killing each other.
Dang.
No, seriously, they were geniuses at it. They just kept killing each other.
Yeah, right, exactly. No.
And they were very learned at mathematics, economics,
murder,
impaling people.
Humans are weird. We're such a weird race. Good Lord. Oh my gosh. Well,
I hate COVID.
It sounds like you need some sleep. Let's say we go beat something up.
No. I'm just fine. We'll kill some people and then I'm going to go to sleep.
All right, I'm going to stop recording and let's go kill some people. All right.